Hi, everyone. So we're going to be looking at Blanche Lazzell's work today. There's a show coming to the Bruce Museum, Blanche Lazzell Becoming an American Modernist. This show has actually traveled from, I think it was down in West Virginia. Um, anyway, it I had seen her work years ago out in Cape Cod at Julie Heller Gallery, and I always remembered, liking her work. So this exhibit traces the artist's pioneering approach to abstraction in the United States. After earning a degree in fine arts at West Virginia University, Lazzell pursued an education that was increasingly international and avant-garde. In 1907, she enrolled at the Art Students League um, in New York with William Merritt Chase, and studied alongside classmates such as Georgia O'Keeffe, and a couple of the other women that were involved in the printmaking thing that she became best known for, the white line printmaking out in Cape Cod. Um, so basically, she went from Chase in 1912. She went to Paris and took classes there, and was exposed to the Fauve and that approach. And upon her return, she went out to Provincetown. She had heard about Charles Hawthorne, who was teaching out there, who had actually been a student and an assistant to William Merritt Chase, and he created his own um, school out in Cape Cod. And when Lazzell was in Paris, she had heard about the kind of exciting and open atmosphere of Cape Cod, so she wanted to get out there. She took a second trip to Paris in 1923 to study with the Cubists, Liget, Lahaute, and Glizet, especially Glizet. He um, was really somebody who spoke a language that she understood, and she got a lot out of him. So I'm going to go on. This show features more than 60 paintings, prints, and works on paper, largely drawn from the collection of the Art Museum of West Virginia University. This exhibit is a testament to a visionary female artist who translated European modernisms into a uniquely American, highly personal form. And you see a picture of her at around 1900. She would have been um, at West Virginia University at that point, and she was studying art. Um, Her father, well, let's see. I'm gonna go through a little bio stuff for you. But one thing throughout her life was her thirst for new ideas, for learning, was always very strong. Um, so she grew up in a farm near Maysville, West Virginia. This is near the Monongahela River. She was the ninth of 10 children and attended a one-room schoolhouse. Her mother died when she was 12 years old after giving birth to 10 children. I would not be surprised. Um, and at 15, she was enrolled at what is now Wesleyan College. It was actually a prep school at that time. Later, she was matriculated at West Virginia University. There's the West Virginia University connection, um, where she decided to study fine art. Her father supported her education, though she worked while she was taking classes. Um, she, let's see, she headed to New York in, well, I have 1908, but they said 1907. Yeah, okay. Um, and she studied with William Merritt Chase at the time. Um, and in 1912, as I said, she went to Europe, and basically they they did the grand tour. She went to Italy. She went to uh, France, Germany, England, and was really spent the year studying. And upon return, she goes to Cape Cod and studies with Charles Hawthorne. Hawthorne embraced a kind of radical approach to breaking down subject matter um, into kind of spots of color rather than detail. So you can see in these two paintings that are both Blanche Lazzell's pieces that she's integrating kind of a Fauvist approach. She starts out with this kind of 1915. It's rather impressionistic and not real close detail, and this is something that that Hawthorne would have encouraged.
Larry,
Um,
what is
yes,
Fauvist again?
okay. The fauves are the wild beasts, basically Matisse, Derain. Um, those folks used bright, intense, pure color, and
Okay,
you can see in these hollyhocks that's a
right.
typical Fauvist piece. So they got the nickname Fauvis, but from a curator that I mean a art critic who came into a room and looked at their work in relationship to a very staid sculpture and said this sculpture is in a room full of wild beasts. So that's where that one came from. Um, but the name stuck. Um, so here is a Charles on the left is Charles Hawthorne's work. You can see that it's much more abstracted, um, big areas of color, bright splotches, as opposed to William Merritt Chase, which is really kind of beautiful, typical impressionist work. Um, so Hawthorne definitely encouraged his students to take some more risks and use some bigger marks to create their pieces. Um, and here is a detail. Um, Hawthorne would have a model pose against a bright background so that you couldn't see details. So he encouraged the students to paint masses rather than features, calling the figures mud heads. So, just these very abstracted pieces. Um, if he had pursued this a little bit more thoroughly, I would be a lot more pleased with his work. He did rock back and forth between a more traditional, but hey, he did traditional portraits. They sold. Great, good for him. So, and these are Lazzell's pieces from 1917 that kind of go along with that hollyhocks. They're very bright, old colors. And again, she had been in Europe. She had seen the what was the avant-garde at the time and brought that to bear on these pieces. Um, at one point, she was out in Cape Cod. She would go back and forth between Cape Cod and West Virginia, and then basically she went to another artist colony in 1917, which is called Bird Cliff, which is up in Woodstock, which of course another artists colony. Um, and in when she was up there, she was exposed to printmaking, and that's when she started to do her. That was her first woodcut. These are not the examples of that particular woodcut, but the white line woodcut is basically what they do with the block, with a block of wood, is they cut these lines into it. And then with watercolor, they paint in the sections that are the different colors, as opposed to the traditional approach to woodcut, which would be to cut different blocks for different colors, and you ink them up, and then you register them. You take the paper and print it on the different blocks to get the different colors on your piece. This is all at once. Um, and on the left is Edith Lake Wilkinson, and I am going to talk a lot more about her later. She is a really wonderful artist, tragic figure, um, basically. But I'll go into a little bit more depth on that later. Um, but this Edith Lake Wilkinson piece, Mother Love, was dated 1914, and actually there's another male artist who was credited with having created the white line technique, and his first one was in 1915. So the thinking is that they developed this as a group, but but Wilkinson is by far one of the early ones using this approach. In 19, so this is Nordfeld. This is the male um, printmaker that had been credited with the white line, and they're beautiful pieces, no question about that. There's just some question about who gets cred, and in 1916, um, the male kind of wins out. In 1918, Blanche moved to Provincetown. She summered out there for from about 1915 on, but in 1918 she decided to move permanently there, finding the social and artistic atmosphere more supportive of a quote unquote independent woman, which was a code name for gay. Basically, this a number of the women that were involved in this white line um, uh, movement were lesbians, and they lived a lifestyle in Provincetown, which would be difficult in other places. Even Greenwich Village at the time, you could be openly gay, but uh, it was still socially fringy, and um, so this was still a remote kind of Portuguese fishing village, and the artist colony brought another layer of income, another um, basically tourists came, so this was really quite welcome. So the White Line Group developed a kind of intimate imagery um, with bright, vibrant colors. Um, let's see. Uh, this is Agnes Weinrich, and and basically what you see here on the left is one of the wooden blocks with the um, it's stained from the color from the watercolor that they used to ink up the block. On the right is one of the prints pulled from the block, and you can see that it's backwards, it's reversed. That's what happens when you're doing a block, you're doing it backwards. Um, so um, and here is an example of one of the 36 views of Mount Fuji by Hokusai. Um, it stands as one of the most renowned and beloved examples of Japanese woodblock prints worldwide. And you can see some of the white line business is going on even in this. The clouds, the white part of Mount Fuji. Um, so this may have been pulled from two blocks rather than just one block. Um, on the on the right is a piece by Arthur Wesley Dow, who was actually um, Wilkinson studied with him. She was again another artist who was she was fairly wealthy. She had family support and studied at Columbia where Dow was teaching, and actually she would have met Georgia O'Keeffe there too. This woodblock depicts an evening landscape of a wide um, blue stream receding into the distant green grass with a darker blue blue sort of blue green trees silhouetted against the sky, and then that half moon. um, the moon would have been achieved by leaving the white of the paper exposed and then printing with the yellow into that. And it's a small print. I mean, it's 4.5 by 7 inches. But Dow definitely was somebody who would have been aware of the Japanese print and would have passed the respect on to his students. And that's one of the reasons why I personally feel like uh, Wilkinson may have been the one to first explore the white line woodblock. I could be wrong. So um, this this again, um, you can see that by 1920, Blanche Lazzell is exploring abstraction a lot more. She's uh, simplifying the forms and using really bold color. The interaction of the shapes. There's um, a kind of vortex in this composition. You can see how um, that complex round um, plate that's holding up the vase is kind of a spiral rather than a circle. Um, and then there's a this wonderful Wilkinson on the right. Okay. And as I said, um, Lazzell really saw a lot of the contemporary abstraction. She would have seen Cubism when she was in Europe, the early phases of Cubism in 1912. Um, and you can see the boldness of these kind of very simplified geometric forms. It definitely harkens to a very color oriented, but this it looks a lot like a Brock to me. Um, and here you see a one of the drawings for the the basic woodblock print. You can see that it's reversed um, in when you look at the flower in the lower right hand corner of the drawing and you look at the lower left hand corner of the print, you can see how this was flipped over. Okay, these two figures, the one on the right would have been before she went back to study with the cubists. Um, and the one on the left is is after she came back from studying with Lazzell. Um, and you can see how much more integrated those shapes are with the figure in the one on the left. The one on the right is a bit more disjointed in a way. It flows. It's got its merits, but the one on the right, the forms are much more integrated. Okay, and here are a few images. The again, the one on the left is in 1919, before she went back to study with the cubists. The shapes are much more simple. There's not as much overlap. Um, uh, the one on the left was 1926, so she would have studied for a good couple of years. She was there from 23 to 24. So what you would do is go home, work on paintings, and then bring them into the studio to get critiques. Um, and so basically, um, th this piece was a post cubist influenced piece, and you can see the layering that's going on in it is a lot more clear. um, uh, the play of the geometric forms of the buildings against the more organic shapes of the background, and also there's this kind of, again, this vortex of business, this swirling shape in in the composition that kind of really pulls it together. And this, I believe, would have been one of the pieces that she did when she was on the WPA, which was, basically the industrial aspect of America was very much a part of the thing that the government program encouraged. So, but again, interesting play between the close up um, uh, geometric architectonic forms of the factory against the more organic hills and shapes in the background. So this Gliese fellow was by far the most influential. Um, he's the image in the center is his work. Liget and Lahaute were both teachers that she studied with, but she felt a most commonality with Albert, uh, and you can really see it in the work. Um, I'm gonna read some of what she had to say. Twice a week, we did our work at home and took it to him for criticism. A wonderful teacher. I learned later a theosophist, my own philosophy, and we did not know it. In a letter that she wrote in 1944, she says, "Please don't forget that all the curves, etc., in my canvases are drawn freehand and exactly as I uh, feel that they should be. No kind of instrument can do that for me." Let's see. I'm going to go here. Okay. Um, so um, I learned these things when I was painting china, when I was painting ceramics. Um, little dreaming that I would be preparing to study with the great French painter Glizet. Those years of abstract experimentation. So this was written in 1944. Those years of abstract experiment um, and work in color wood blocks in Provincetown previous to 1923 prepared me also for what I did with Glizet. Um, no wonder he said I worked like an angel. These experiments, in these experiments, I'm trying to see what I can get out of all those theories of modern art that I've gotten from Glizet and the Golden Section and Hans Hofmann and all the others. Use all this for my own expression. That's what counts. It will be my own or nothing, maybe both. So this color woodcut, um, in many ways, is essential Lazzell. Um, uh, the colors are bold, the shapes, while descriptively true to their content, its flowers and vases, the shapes tend toward the angular, the geometric, the abstract. Lazzell was hailed as a bridging artist between earlier firmly representational and later artists who embrace abstraction. So here we have a diagram that I pulled up to kind of show you a rather um, underlying force that's in the composition that she's created here. And this is 1924, so this would have been really around the time that she had been studying um, in France. Um, Underneath this, the golden section figures into all of this. Really, the golden section is also known as the golden ratio, is the mathematical ratio that artists use to create balance, symmetry, and order in their work. It's considered aesthetically pleasing to the human eye and is based on the Fibonacci sequence, which you find throughout nature. And above is the great wave piece, and you see the golden section is the underlying structure that's in that. And although it may be hard to follow in this, if we superimpose the golden section on this composition, it's in there. Um, really, something that was very uh, in the air at the time of the early abstractionists. Um, and I have talked about this before when we've talked about abstract painting. Um, it's a powerful organizing factor. And here's more samples of her experimentation with these kind of more abstracted pieces, beautiful color harmonies that she comes up with. If anybody has any questions, throw them in there. Throw them in the chat, and Joan will get them to me. Um, let's see. Sailboat is a woodcut. Again, the white line woodcut. This print is very much recognized amongst Lazzell's most admired and accomplished. Here, more than in some other works, the texture of the wood can be clearly discerned. Um, Lazzell plays with this using watercolor on the block, laying the sheet of wet paper over it, and burnishing the back. The grain of wood is retained in the print. Um, so basically, that's kind of the technique that they use. And um, this is really, you know, a, a print from imagery right near her studio in Cape Cod. She built a studio. Well, we're going to talk about that in a second. So, um, in 1933, this print was created for the WPA, features her studio pier in 1937. She built her studio in 1933 on an old, fisherman's wharf pier. And this is what it looked like. And there's the lady herself. Um, Basically, um, she lived there year round, which was, kind of rough in the wintertime. That would be a rather cold spot to be in. Um, and the white lime woodcut that's on the right is one of backyards. If you've ever been to Provincetown, this would kind of look look a bit familiar even today. Um, so she would paint in her studio and actually open her studio to tourists on the weekdays. Actually, come to think of it, uh, she would open her studio to the tourist trade. There was a period of time when the male painters in the town put a restriction on the women painters that they couldn't show during the week. That didn't last long, and Blanche did not take to that kind of restriction. Uh, um, so basically, they would open it to the tourists when they came, uh, and she had these wonderful plantings that she decorated her cottage with. Okay, this wonderful little painting with its really subtle color shifts and shape relationships is, as you watch it, as you look at it, it's just quietly active. The interaction of the forms, how the shapes play off of each other. Uh, it's a really beautiful piece, very quiet. Love the frame too.
Larry, I
Yes.
have a comment.
Yeah.
Um, she made frame for that piece.
I don't think she made I'm not sure if she made the frame or not, but one way or the other, it really fit with the piece, didn't
It's beautiful.
it?
I love the frame. I
Very
wonder if we
charming.
could do something like that at the library one, frame making,
Ah,
because that's beautiful.
no.
Okay.
That takes some real skills.
Somebody else says, is that someone sleeping in a bed?
Actually, it's a seashell, but if you see someone sleeping in a bed, maybe that's what it is for you.
It's a
Uh,
seashell? I don't see that
yes,
either.
that's what it's called. It's called
Oh,
shell. That's that white form that's in the center is like a conch shell,
oh,
abstracted, but a conch shell.
okay. I don't see either one of those
Doesn't matter.
explanations. Doesn't
They're
matter.
beautiful shapes.
I guess the person who asked about the frame loves it also.
Yes.
And somebody else doesn't see the shell at the center
Yeah. Well,
focus. Yeah. That's why
okay.
it's so nice to discuss it with others.
Yep. Um, so again, this piece is one of the white line lino cuts in this case. And there's the texture in the piece is really interesting to see. uh, you know, it it looks almost like wood grain. So I'm not sure. Maybe she actually cut very, very gently into the surface a little bit to get that striation in the whatever that is, the stream leading up or the road leading up to the structure. But interesting. Okay. And again, as I said, Lazzell was always open to experimentation and learning. Um, Hans Hofmann opened up his school in Cape Cod in 1934, and in 1937, at I guess she was about 66 at that point, Blanche took classes with Hans Hofmann, who really was somebody who brought all of the the cubism and color concepts that were part of the avant-garde of Europe to America. He taught many of the great, second generation abstract painters in America. Frankenthaler studied with him for a brief period of time. Wolf Kahn, Paul Ressica. There's a list of names. Larry Rivers studied with him. There's a Robert Goodnaw, who actually we have a Goodnaw at the Chappaqua Library, which we're um, trying to find a new location for so we can see it better. Um, so she studied with Hoffman, and the piece on the left is a Lazzell, and I believe that is from. It's not dated, but I believe it was from that period. But you can see um, the business that's going on with Hoffman. It's really about the interaction of color, flat planes up against each other, the play of organic and geometric form. And here is a series of drawings that Lazzell did in his class. Um, the the ones on the bottom here are kind of a progression that she did in the class. And he would come around and work with the students as they were developing the drawings. And the one in the middle on the top is one where his marks, those little plus and minus circles, we're talking about having the planes in the drawing go forward and back. So it's basically very uh, abstract concepts that she was involved in and that he was working with her on. Okay. Wharf Scene from 1951. This is a late piece. She died in 56. So this is, really kind of, this is a 28 by 36-inch oil. Um, Beautiful, clean color, big shapes. And this is the last one that I have in here from 1952. Um, just lanes of color. You can see how, she absorbed that teaching and the ideas that Hoffman was talking about into her work. Um, she always rocked back and forth between recognizable and less recognizable uh, representational pieces, but this is really pure abstraction. And um, now, there is a wonderful YouTube that talks about the whole, um, uh, actually, Blanche Lazzell, but also the other women that were involved in the White Line print movement and the whole atmosphere of what it was like out in Provincetown at that time. And then there's another set of a couple of YouTubes from um, the University of West Virginia that are really good. They're both on YouTube also. Now, I'm gonna blast through a few pieces. I got about another 10 minutes. I'll keep your attention for a few more minutes because I think that I want to show you some of the work that was done. Um, and this is um, these are all paintings by Edith. And I want to tell you a little bit about her. She was basically a contemporary of Lazzell. They knew each other in New York. They knew each other at the Art Students League, and and met again. Um, Basically at Hawthorne's place. Um, so she studied in Europe. I see a lot of Van Gogh in her work. Um, she was a really brilliant painter and white line um, uh, printer. And these pieces are really, really tremendous. What happened with Edith Lake Wilkinson is she basically um, came from money, had inherited money, so she was able to paint independently. She lived with a wonderful woman, and they had a really great, vibrant life in Provincetown, and they went back and forth, Provincetown to Boston. Um, but in 1924, both of her parents died of asphyxiation. I can't remember how far back that was. It probably was in the the late teens. So she inherited a lot of money. And uh, her sister also passed away. So she had enough money to be able to live on and do her work independently. Um, but when I look at these pieces, it's like such, it's Van Gogh um, in Provincetown. Um, in 1924, a lawyer who had been handling her estate um, had her declared incompetent and got her thrown into uh, got her institutionalized and took her money basically. And her work was put into uh, a a box, packed in a trunk, and and was packed off in an attic um, by her nephew, who was her only living relative. Um, Her granddaughter heard this story about her and found this trunk. They did um, a documentary about her, and it is on Canopy. You can watch this thing. Well worth watching. It was done by HBO in let's see, 2015, and it's available for you to watch on Canopy. I can't recommend it highly enough. And basically, it will give you more insight into this whole white line and the milieu that they were operating in Provincetown. So that's it.
Well, that was a lot, Larry. That was a
Yes.
lot. Thank you. I just want to mention also before I just go off that the Gothic short stories, which will go into cinematic reality, is at 7 o'clock on the 23rd of October. So thanks, Larry, and I hope to see you at the two programs for Halloween, and also don't forget the Diwali celebration on the 16th. All right, have a nice weekend, everyone. Bye.
Okay. Bye.